And welcome back to Silent Hill 3 In Depth. This is going to be the last part. We're going to finally end this long delayed project and then hopefully get the scripted video out shortly after the release of the final edited video. But we are now at the very end of the game. All the stakes are out, all the cards are on the table. And speaking of cards, let's take a look at this. Oops. One moment, making sure everything's recorded. Test. Alright, we're all picking up. Fuck it, I won't edit it out. I'm lazy. But, speaking of cards on the table, transition, I got the Eye of Night Tarot card. Let's take a look at it. So this is going to be the big puzzle for this, I guess it's dungeon, if we want to call it. I don't know why I'm using Zelda terminology. Eye of Night Tarot card. Found this in the chapel. Is this a real tarot card, though? Number 22, the Eye of Night. So, what's really interesting about the Eye of Night, as one of the 5 tarot cards in the game, is that, for the sake of the puzzle, all 5 tarot cards that we need to collect in order to access the final boss, they all represent different characters in the game. And the Eye of Night being the first one you get is interesting because, according to the Book of Lost Memories, it represents the god of the cult. But the really interesting thing is that the Eye of Night tarot card isn't real. But the question, is this a real tarot card though? No, it's not. This is fake. Like, there's never been an Eye of Night in any of the tarot decks throughout history. Which, if we're going on a card that's non-existent, representing the god, that ties back into what I said earlier about my interpretation of what the Silent Hill God is. Essentially, a Wizard of Oz boogeyman. But, however, let's look at another thing here, because it is interesting that the thing we get that symbolizes the god is right in front of this. Let's examine this. Somehow I remember this stained glass. It shows God and the man and woman who birthed there. I used to come to this chapel all the time when I was a little girl. I came to worship God and ask for my prayers to be answered. But it wasn't actually me. But it wasn't exactly me. It was actually Alessa when she was a little girl. But anyway, none of my prayers were ever answered. So, once again, as we said in the last episode for the throughout the second act, really, Heather is now, at the end of the second act, finally starting to differentiate Alessa as a separate individual and beginning to see herself as her own unique person. This is the start of that arc. But there's a couple things I want to point out about the stained glass window here. So the god is the woman draped in red there, with her face covered by the red drapes, and her arms posed to the side in this, like, come at me bro pose. I want you to keep this design in mind, specifically the veiled face and the standing pose like that, with the circular stage that she's on. Just keep that in mind. But, because this is a church, this is actually where we get a little bit of lore for the Silent Hill cult itself. Because over here, what we get are these paintings that give us a description of their creation myth. So let's give it a read. One, origin. In the beginning, people had nothing. Their bodies ached, and their hearts held nothing but hatred. They fought endlessly, but death never came. They despaired, stuck in the eternal quagmire. Two, birth. A man offered a serpent to the sun and prayed for salvation. A woman offered a reed to the sun and asked for joy. Feeling pity for the sadness that had overrun the earth, God was born from those two people. Three, salvation. God made time and divided it into day and night. God outlined the road to salvation and gave people joy, and God took endless time away from the people. Endless time sounding a lot like eternal life to me, but we'll talk about that momentarily. This is an interesting one. Who's that little fellow on the right there? Or on the left side there, excuse me. It's 5 in the morning. I'm tired. I digress, though. 4. Creation. God created beings to lead people in obedience to her. The red god, Shkil Bara. The yellow god, Lobselvith. Many gods and angels. Finally, God set out to create paradise where people would be happy just by being there. Five, promise. But yet God's strength ran out and she collapsed. All the world's people grieved this unfortunate event, yet God breathed her last. She returned to the dust, promising to come again. Six, faith. So God hasn't been lost. We must offer our prayers and not forget our faith. We wait and hope for the day when the path to paradise will be opened. So, that is the creation myth of the cult. I'm honestly not that much of an adherent to analyzing the cult's theology or anything like that. That's not exactly my interest in Silent Hill. But I do think a few things of note are interesting here. It's a matriarchal religion, which for a monotheistic religion is like very rare. With all like the Christian and Catholic tropes that the cult's using, like, look at this church, stained glass windows, like this is all like very Catholic tinged, but it's a matriarchal religion, which is pretty unique. Another thing of note is it seems like the gift that God bestows, or at least the God of the cult bestows, is death. It's an escape from eternal life. That almost sounds closer to what we discussed earlier when we were talking about Mahayana Buddhism and the escape from the endless loop of reincarnation, which is the goal of Buddhism. Interesting to note. But what's more interesting to note is this painting here. The red god, Jekil Bara, the yellow god, Lobselvith. So, this has led to a lot of speculation over the years. What specifically? Well, let's just look at the painting again. That's fucking Pyramid Head on the left. That's just Pyramid Head. So, this is gonna be another one where I'm just gonna plagiarize other people and present it as an argument. But the YouTuber RagnarRox did a 2-part video on the red and yellow god for his channel, which admittedly he took a lot of his information from a 2006 Proboard post by username Saint Atos, which also discusses the symbolism and meaning of the red and the yellow god. I don't want to say plagiarism, but he didn't credit the guy, so a little strange how close they are. But at the very least, they are well-produced videos, and I will link them in the description of this episode. But let's talk about the red god, specifically, Jekil Bara. Now, anyone familiar, or at least who remembers the Silent Hill 2 expansion Born from a Wish, will actually recall that Jekil Papa is another figure from Silent Hill mythology and lore, referenced in that, game, we'll call it. I don't know why they changed it to Jekil Bara for this one, but to make a long story short, both Jekil Bara and Lobselvith are more Mesoamerican tinged, and allegedly, according to RagnarRox and Saint Atos, the translations to different Mayan or Mesoamerican languages and tongues for just for our example right now, Jacques Barra roughly would translate to flowering tip of the spear. Once again, I'm just going to say watch those videos if you want a real in-depth explanation as to how these conclusions are reached. It admittedly flies over my head, I'm going to be real. But if Jacques Barra does, for the sake of argument, translate to flowering tip of the spear, and we all know a very prominent spear user from Silent Hill 2 featured in this painting, it's not hard to say that what the game could be implying is that Pyramid Head is the Red God. This is also tying into a comment by the art director Masahiro Ito, where Pyramid Head, as we see him in Silent Hill 2, is a warped reflection of the executioner's garb of a sect of the cult called the Valtiel sect. And in the Silent Hill 2 in-depth, I actually posted a high-res version of a picture from that, of what's presumed to be like the source of the Misty Day Remains of Judgment painting that James sees in that game. But if we have a Valtiel following Heather throughout this entire game, we have Pyramid Head right here, presumably as the Red God. And Pyramid Head is, in his appearance, a reference to the sect of Valtiel, the cult. There's some lines being drawn here, but we're not going to talk about it just yet. We'll talk about Lob Sylvith in a little bit as well, but we'll talk about the Red God once we go into a real deep dive into the Valtiel character. So, I think we're done here. Oh, I am paranoid about my recording today. I don't know why. I need to make sure this doesn't crash. My PC is on its last legs currently right now, so. Oh, this is a really fun one. I got a church map. So, it's an incomplete map, but the logic is because Heather is getting Alessa's memories of coming to this church as a child when she was dragged here by Dahlia. As you continue, sort of like what happened with the Labyrinth map in Silent Hill 2, more of it will be automatically filled in the further you progress. But it's really fun, it's a kid's drawing though, so it's like her memories of childhood coming back through this like crayon drawing, which I forget which member of the staff actually did this, but this was actually made by one staffer's kid who drew the whole map and like crayoned it based on the outline of the game. It's really fun. That's cute. So let's get to one of the more interesting sequences in the game. I don't know if it has much lore implications, but it's a tone setter. It's very similar to a lot of the shit that we saw in Silent Hill 2. I had the feeling that there's someone on the other side of this door. But the door is shut tight, and I can't open it no matter how hard I try.
God, please forgive me. I know I'll be put to death for the sins I've committed. And I'll go to my death gladly and with a peaceful heart. But please, grant me just a small piece of your everlasting mercy. Let me see my child once within your golden gates. Deliver me not to hell, but to purgatory. Allow me to atone for my sins there. I'll stand within the very flames of redemption, no matter how they burn me. Forgive me for my wicked act of revenge. And deliver the soul of my poor murdered daughter. Please, also care for the soul of the girl whose life I have taken. God, I am a child, trembling with fear as I stare at death. Soothe my tortured soul with your infinite mercy. Please, forgive me.
So this is a thematic and tone-setting scene more than anything else for the game. So there's an interesting detail I just want to point out. So Silent Hill 3 has two endings. It has essentially a good and a bad ending. And what's really interesting to me is that if you forgive the woman in the confessional, it actually pushes you towards the game's bad ending. Now, most people will, gravitate towards the I forgive you option. It's like, oh, this is someone crying and in distress, and they're clearly remorseful for their actions. I have to forgive them. I'll make them feel good. I think the reason, though, outside of a lot is... Well, there's actually a lot of reasons why I think I forgive you is the one that pushes you to the bad ending. And I think it ties back to, at least for our example today, primarily to the game's forced identity themes. Remember to what she's saying. The woman is sitting there begging and thinking she is speaking to God for forgiveness. And by Heather answering that, by Heather giving that forgiveness that this woman is asking God for, Heather's accepting the role given to her by Claudia and the cult already, as we'll see later, the mother and daughter of God, i.e., God herself. Again, the line is, I forgive you. It's not God forgives you. It's I forgive you. She's embracing that role, which has been forced onto her by the cult and Claudia primarily. Another thing, too, is that if you say anything, this woman is a member of the cult of Silent Hill. Essentially this death cult. And by answering her here, by saying anything, you're validating her belief in this death cult. So you're pushing her further and further into this delusion. And frankly, though, and I think this is a point I'm going to steal from, once again, this is the theft episode, but from the YouTuber who made another, Acer Aesthetics, who made a Silent Hill 3 commentary himself. He actually had an interesting take on this, where we've heard something similar to this before. It's a woman sitting here, talking about a crime she's committed, a murder she's committed, and the horrible remorse she has over it, the intense guilt. Who else does that sound similar to?
That's why I did it, honey. I just couldn't watch you suffer. No. That's not true. You also said you didn't want to die. The truth is, I hated you. I wanted you out of the way. I wanted my life back.
This is essentially the flip side of Silent Hill 2 and James Sunderland. And James Sunderland is the only way that James in that game received any sort of, salvation or forgiveness was by working for it himself. No one could bestow that on James. He had to walk through hell himself to find it. And by validating this woman and just giving her a Hail Mary, I forgive you, not only is Heather embracing the role of the god of the cult, not only is she pushing this woman, assuming she's real, by the way, and we'll get to that in a moment here, she's pushing her further into this death cult. It's also the antithesis of Silent Hill 2's themes. It's the avoidance of responsibility. Another reading of this, though. Another one. And this is why this is going to be a long one today. There's a lot of stop and talk. Is that I think the sequence is not. I don't think. First of all, I don't think that's an actual person on the other side. I think this is pure town fuckery. It's reflecting and critiquing Heather's desire for revenge. The woman was talking about getting revenge specifically, which led to her murder. What we know about Heather is that despite all of her big talk up to this point about how she's going to kill Claudia, how she wants revenge on Claudia, she's had 2 occasions with Claudia at gunpoint defenseless, and she didn't pull the trigger. What's the hesitation? Well, Heather commented in the apartment before she left for Silent Hill that her father, himself a very religious man, would be upset if he heard her plan to kill Claudia. So, back to the woman in the booth, she's admitting that her crime was getting revenge and killing someone. Now, we have next to no context of this situation, but the woman here is clearly devastated by it, crying and sobbing out of grief, even for the person she killed, that clearly enraged her to the point of violent, murderous revenge. At the end of it all, it is nothing but a husk of a woman. The revenge didn't matter. Essentially, I think what this is the town mocking and playing on Heather's insecurity of what's going to happen after she gets her revenge and what's going to come of her. Essentially, if she does just shoot Claudia dead and that's it, it's just a lifetime of grief and emptiness afterwards. It's giving me very similar vibes to the ending of the True Grit remake, if you've seen that. Really, more than anything else, I think this is a tone setter for the last act and the conclusion for the arcs of Heather and Claudia. It's making the players stop and reflect on their respective motivations, really. Heather's had multiple chances to get her revenge and kill Claudia, but she never brought herself to pull the trigger, probably because of this struggle of, will it be worth it? What would the person I'm trying to avenge think? And it's a doubt. She's having doubt is the key word there. On the flip side of that, Claudia also, on the surface, was entirely gung-ho and certain of her plan to force Heather to bring God to term. But we've already been seeing her mask crumble up to this point, and as we're going to keep seeing, there is no certainty for the Claudia character. She is a pathetic and lost individual. And I think this is just a tone setter for how the rest of the game is going to go. Oh boy. So, all answers, don't say anything. There's nothing more to be said. I think that is the real, once again, I'm just going to repeat, that is the real downside of Silent Hill 3, in my opinion, is that a lot of its strongest content is reserved for the very, very end. It's really thematically resonant content. Well, that's not good. Speaking of something that's interesting, look at the closer in this room. That's the same closer as before, but something's wrong. Almost like it's rotten and moldy and covered in moss. There's something just wrong with it. I think what it's showing is that the game's coming to an end. Oh, there we go. Yes, this is the room I wanted. Whew. So, unfortunately, because there's a few different paths you can take, it is actually kind of easy to get lost here at the very end. The shelves are covered with file folders and boring books. There's no useful information here as far as I can tell. Oh, look at this Resident Evil Remake camera angle. Hell yeah. Oh, this is important. Ah, shit. Okay. Well, it's a cassette tape. There's no label, but the tape's been removed. It might be worth checking out. Okay, so I have long hand bullets. I think we're fine for the most part. But let's read this. This is interesting. There it is, the halo of the sun. Let's get an explanation for the save symbol. There are a bunch of papers in this file. I get the feeling that it's a handwritten copy of some book. It represents the deity known as the halo of the sun. In heraldry, symbolizes a religious group. The 2 outer circles are charity and resurrection. The 3 inner circles are present, past, and future. Just a note, 3 circles on top of a larger circle, the larger circle representing resurrection, and the 3 interior representing past, present, and future. Fucking interesting. Usually drawn in red, occasionally drawn in black or other colors, but blue reverses the meaning into a curse on God, and is therefore forbidden. So, that's interesting, because where have we seen a blue halo of the sun? If you remember, viewer, at the very beginning of the game, in the Mall Otherworld section, at the Moonstone puzzle, the 300th day and night, the puzzle that's implying a failed pregnancy, above that door, there is a blue halo of the sun. So, the door representing a failed pregnancy has a curse upon God placed above it in the nightmare hell world. So what does that mean? In my opinion, again, all speculation here, this is purely just me reading too deeply into this shit now. I think what it shows is that the idea of the god that the cult worships, that god can never be born. It is always destined to fail in order to perpetuate the cycle. The cycle must end and restart again with the god dying and some incarnation of Alessa, I suppose, being born. It always has to end that way. In order for a cycle to be complete, the birth must fail, and a new incarnation of Alessa Cheryl Heather has to leave the town. And again, remember, just really hammering my fanfiction tier opinions on the lore of Silent Hill, but God isn't real. It's just the source of the core trauma of the person, whoever of the town. Let me rephrase. I'm sorry. The God isn't real. What the God of Silent Hill is a reflection of the host of the nightmare, of what we call the dreamer, of their core trauma. It is their biggest possible hang-up that the town is reflecting back at them to draw the most reaction from. And by that logic, by that interpretation, if, say, in Silent Hill 2, the final boss with Mary/Maria is James's god, by that same token, she cannot be reborn either. Or can she with the rebirth ending? The rebirth ending is actually a lot more interesting in context of Silent Hill 3 taking the story of Silent Hill and turning it into a cyclic, almost like Buddhist reincarnation story. The Rebirth and Maria endings are far more interesting in terms of the lore of the overall trilogy. I don't know. Kind of fun. Let's get out of here. Uh-oh. Uh-oh. Okay, there we go. There's a picture here of an angel flying into the heavens. Nothing special. I get the feeling there's something behind this picture, though. That girl's cries and footsteps disappeared beyond it, after all. Will you remove the picture of the angel? And there's the door. But let's go this way first. Let's examine a few things around the room. I think there's some bullets and stuff here. Saint Jennifer, unwavering faith under Death's blade. So, fun thing about Saint Jennifer is that Saint Jennifer, the cult's martyr, is actually featured in Silent Hill 2 originally. Once James leaves Brookhaven and needs to find the key to the Silent Hills Historical Society, he goes to the Rosewater Park, to the statue of Saint Jennifer, digs underneath it, and finds the old key to the Historical Society. Just a fun fact. Let's look at the other one first. I want to save the best for last. St. Nicholas. Miraculous hands, a doctor of God. Jolly old St. Nicholas, will you lend an ear? The circle means reincarnation. That's what's said on that paper back there. So death isn't the end. Pretty good deal if you ask me. Thanks to reincarnation, I died as Alessa, but I'm still living as myself. But you know, just the thought of it is starting to turn my stomach. Let's save the game. There's a bat in my belfry. Finally, the big one. Saint Alessa, Mother of God, Daughter of God. This picture, that's me. I'm holding the baby. And I'm the baby being held. The me that wanted death and disappeared with God 17 years ago. And the me here and now that sought life. So let's talk about the yellow god, Lobselvith. So what I find so interesting about the description of this picture, Saint Alessa, the Mother of God and the Daughter of God, would that not logically imply that Alessa is God? Just logically? Or can the cult never view Alessa as an individual more than anything more than a tool for their faith without any sort of individual agency beyond childbirth and be in their fucking baby factory, essentially? It's this interesting contradiction within the faith itself, where Alessa can be nothing more than a means to an end for their god, despite both being the mother and daughter of said god. It's an interesting contradiction. But once again, watch RagnarRox's video for a full explanation for the translation fuckery of Lobselvith. But allegedly, according to him and St. Ados of the Proboards, Lobselvith roughly translates to broken wheel of flesh. To me, that sounds a lot like failed cycles of rebirth of Alessa, Cheryl, and Heather. Flip the page. It's worth noting that the reason I wanted to do the save point first is that Heather herself comments on reincarnation and death not being the end. And while she seems like kind of okay with it at that point, there's a little bit of hesitancy at the very end there, and I think it ties back to the themes of breaking cycles and fate, because there's, as we went over earlier, there is that Easter egg of Valtiel reviving Heather on death, which is canon allegedly for the games. So it pushes the idea of forced roles and forced identity further. Even death doesn't free Heather from the cycle and the role of Mother of God, Daughter of God. Like, Alessa was wrong. Death doesn't even free her from this. And specifically, the Book of Lost Memory quote about the deaths in the game being canon and the resurrection at the save point being in-universe, and I quote, "Regardless of Heather's own will, she is brought to life again by the player, and the story must continue." Even you, the player, are somewhat complicit in the forced identity of Heather. Obviously, like, not in some meta way, because that's stupid, but it's a fun little way to tie video game mechanics into the lore and storytelling. I will say I am tired of meta horror, so I don't want to even start a conversation about that. But as you can see, you're getting like expanded versions of the map here, where it's like you get the crayon one and then what appears to be a pen filling it in. Very fun. Very cool. Here's something. There's Valtiel again. So I've heard some people say that Valtiel is better than Pyramid Head, and I disagree with that statement. I really disagree with that statement, but Valtiel is an interesting figure on his own, and we'll get to him a little while from now, but I just always considered that hipster take on the series that Valtiel is a better character or monster than Pyramid Head to be stupid. And just being contrarian for the sake of being contrarian. I actually forgot that this enemy was there. I forgot. Oh gosh, he got me. This is why I like turning off the radio. It's way scarier. Oh, this scene. Alright. This is the big one. Let's do a little reading first, because this is the big one. Silent Hill's Ancient Gods, a study of their etymology and evolution. What a mouthful. Hey, it's Alessa. Well, it is kind of fun just for these 2 pages that you have the 2 final bosses of Silent Hill 1. You have the Alessa clad in white and the Incubus. There is no religion that has remained unchanged from the moment it was founded. This one is no exception. When this religion fell into the hands of immigrants, it was deeply influenced by their own original Christian beliefs. For example, the traditional representatives of these primal gods may be given the names and descriptions of Christian angels. Thus shared characteristics begin to appear. There's also one rare example, the chief deity, creator of paradise, or lord of serpents and reeds, being dubbed with a demon's name. Of course, this was not done by believers, but by their opponents. Basically, what this book is doing is just hammering in what I've always believed, but I guess based on the description and analysis of this game and the first game that I've seen, apparently was not obvious, that the cult is bullshit. The cult and all of its beliefs are absolute bullshit, and whatever spiritual and supernatural entity is in Silent Hill is just wearing a mask of what the people who view it believe to be already. It's filling in the gaps that you bring, essentially. And there's also a reason why throughout the trilogy you see so many different faiths, cultures, and belief systems represented and warped into this miasma of Silent Hill. Christianity, Shinto, Buddhism, like Mesoamerican, the Aztec and Mayan shit, etc. Like Silent Hill 2 really hammered in, the town essentially is just absorbing and mirroring whatever the dreamer believes and would be most receptive to. The person experiencing the phenomenon is like half of the phenomenon itself. They're completing the loop, essentially. Or closing the circuit, I think is a better way to put it. Okay, so we're going to be talking and standing around for a while the second this cutscene starts.
Hiya, Heather.
You show up everywhere, don't you?
You make me sound like some kind of unwanted pest.
Well, who are you anyway?
Haven't you realized that yet?
Yeah, you're on Claudia's side.
I told you not to put me in the same category as that mad woman.
Well, you're pretty loony yourself.
It's true. We believe in the same God. But I'm quite sane.
So why did you help me out then? Was that also part of trying to resurrect God?
It's not uncommon for people to worship the same god and still disagree.
God? Are you sure you don't mean devil?
Whichever you like. The point is that now I really am on your side. I don't want God to be born. Wouldn't be convenient. Much too unpredictable.
So you've been using me to stop Claudia, is that it? Do your own dirty work.
My dirty work? I think we both had our own interests in mind. You hate her too, don't you? You're the only one who can get it done. I don't have powers like you two. Besides, I always hated getting all hot, sweaty.
Oh, really?
I'm just looking out for myself. Everyone does it. Don't stand there looking so smug. You're the worst person in this room. You come here and enjoy spilling their blood. And listening to them cry out. You feel excited when you step on them and snuff out their lives.
Are you talking about the monsters?
Monsters? They look like monsters to you? Oh no. Don't worry. It's just a joke. By the way, I forgot to ask you. Did you get the seal of Metatron?
What's that?
You don't have it? Leonard was carrying it!
You mean this thing?
Yes, that's it. As long as we have that, we're fine. Here, take this.
I got the book, Otherworld Laws. Okay. So let's talk about that scene. The most infamous scene in the entire series, probably. At least in this game. At least the most infamous scene in this game. But definitely among the top in the franchise. Bar fucking none. Alright, there's a few things I do want to go over before we get into the big thing. So, during that conversation, during the first bit, when Vincent's talking about, oh, yo, it's true, Claudia and I believe in the same God, and there's a bit where Heather says, you know, God, don't you mean devil? And Vincent, he almost sounds annoyed. So we talked about in the very beginning that Vincent breaks character a lot, where he does this sing-songy, very strange delivery. But during this sequence, during that sequence, when he's talking from about being on Heather's side and essentially digging himself into a hole during that conversation with the I'm just looking out for myself kind of justification, there's a very specific line he says to Heather saying, God, don't you mean devil? Where he flippantly just brushes it off and says, whichever you like. It's almost like he's just trying to get through the conversation. Like, as if he doesn't believe what he's saying. We're going to get to that when we get into our final deep dive character discussion into Vincent when all the cards are on the table. But I will say, before the bombshell was dropped by Vincent there, before the question was asked, it is worth noting Vincent was essentially losing the argument. He dug himself into a hole, he cornered himself completely, and he was not able to bullshit and manipulate Heather anymore. He played himself before he dropped the bombshell. They look like monsters to you? Okay, so the Book of Lost Memories is a quote from the writer of this game and Silent Hill 2, Hiroyuki Owaku, specifically about this. Concerning the true nature of the creatures, I think various explanations are possible. Even now, I get lots of questions about the true interpretation here. What Vincent says in the library room is something that was provided as an answer to this question. A whole lot of nothing, really, but at least a vague implication that it's not entirely bullshit for what Vincent's saying here. But let's get into it, because this is one of the more hotly debated things in terms of Silent Hill 3 is Vincent telling the truth here or lying? Because the implication is clear is that the monsters Heather's been fighting have been people, and she's been essentially killing people. That's the implication that he's going for. And the question is Vincent lying? Let's go over both sides here. So, I need to get my throat less dry. Okay. Let's go over the Vincent is telling the truth side of the argument. It is very strange that Silent 3 is the only game in the series where monsters are seen taking orders from humans, in the case of the missionary, having a full back and forth conversation with people, in the case of Leonard, and, as the Book of Lost Memories suggests, being transformed into monsters like the nursing staff in Brookhaven. At least the Book of Lost Memories implies so. This is the only game in the series where that is the case. Very unique. Also, I want to say, well, in case of people being turned into monsters that the Book of Lost Memories implies, that is unique to this game, but people becoming enemies is not. In the first game, the cop character Sybil Bennett is seemingly turned into a puppet nurse during her boss fight, where she essentially gets the same parasitic growth on her back and exhibits the same behaviors as the puppet nurses on the Alchemil Hospital segment. And, well, obviously to get the best ending, you have to save her with the Aglophidus. Harry can absolutely just kill Sybil there. Like, straight up just murder her, and she's gone. Now, that could have just been an example of first game weirdness, and in general, Silent Hill 1, I said in depth like 6 years ago now, I think Sybil as a character is a very strange inclusion with sort of the internal logic of where the series went afterward. But human monsters in that regard with Sybil aren't entirely unprecedented. And another thing too is with the very question of, well, they looked like monsters to you? Silent Hill 2 hard confirms that different people will see different shit in different circumstances while affected in the fog and other worlds. So, all that on the table. Let's go to the Vincent is lying stance. We have to remember, outside of the fact that he was losing this individual conversation up to that point, Vincent is the least reliable character in the entire series. I don't think Vincent is ever truly honest to a single person in this game, even up to the end. Even Dahlia eventually let all the cards out. There is no one less honest, less trustworthy, and less genuine, less disingenuous than Vincent in this franchise. He is constantly lying, manipulating others, trying to play them for his own benefit and amusement. Another one, too, is, so for the prior example of the boss fight with Sybil in the first game, that example cuts both ways, because it shows that normal people can be turned into monsters while in the dream. So if we're talking about the missionary and Leonard specifically, well, they may have been human before. It's entirely possible they just became full-on monsters. Full stop. Like, they are not people at all, and this isn't just Heather's perspective of them. They are literally just monsters now. Because Sybil was on her way to becoming just another puppet nurse. And another thing, too, is that so it's a question. Vincent's asking a question. Well, let's ask a question back. They looked like people to you, Vincent? How do we know that it's monsters not looking like people from Vincent's perspective? We don't know. Why are we assuming Vincent is the barometer of absolute truth when, as we'll get to, I don't think he's as knowledgeable about anything as he pretends to be? But I will say, contrary to what I just said, this is why this is a complicated subject, but there is a little bit of an alternative motivation that I've had for Vincent here, and specifically this scene. So let's say Vincent is lying. Let's say that the whole "they look like monsters to you" is bullshit. What if this is yet another manipulation trick of Vincent trying to prevent God from being born? I think he's being genuinely says that he doesn't want God being born. And we'll get to why I believe that. But let's go back to the second encounter of Claudia and Heather after Harry's dead, where Claudia states that her motivation is to fill Heather's heart with hatred. And as we've seen, the angrier and more upset Heather gets, the more active the god becomes. Like Silent Hill, the town is feeding off of negative emotions. As we'll see later on, a minor spoiler for the very, very, very end, the god itself that is growing within Heather's womb is fueled by that anger, that hatred, that kind of like strong negative emotion. So if that kind of aggression and anger is what fuels and births it, and as we saw during the Leonard boss fight, Heather's becoming very callous towards killing the monsters. As stupid as I think her little one-liner is, if she's truly just becoming callous towards it, to where it doesn't even faze her to face monsters like that anymore, and she will just gladly kill them and be done with it, what if trying to put that element of doubt that they might be people is Vincent's attempt to stop her from engaging in that bloodlust, to stop her going into that anger? By introducing that kind of doubt and guilt to Heather, maybe he's trying a last-ditch effort to delay God being born. I don't know. There's a lot of ways that you could read this scene. I gave 3. I think it's entirely up to you, but it's easily one of the most memorable scenes in the series for a reason. I don't think I've seen a single question flip an entire franchise and fan base up over its head like that. Let's look at the things we got. So we got the Moon Tarot card. Found this in the archives. I don't think it's an especially good card. So the Moon Tarot card obviously represents Vincent. And that's a real tarot card, for the record. Anyone who's familiar with JoJo's Bizarre Adventure will know that. Okay, so let's read Otherworld Laws. A big old book I got from Vincent in the archives. This magic square with strong protective and dispelling properties is called the Virun 7 Crest, or the Seal of Metatron. It will bring results regardless of whether the target is good or evil. Its strength, therefore, places a very high burden on the caster. As it is also difficult to control, it is not usually used. This is why it bears the name Metraton, after the angel Metatron, or Metraton, also known as the Agent of God. So the reason why there's different translations here is because in the original script of Silent Hill 1, they call it Metatron, but during during Dahlia's final speech, it's misspelled as Metraton. But yeah, just going over what we went over in the hospital segment. That's the sigil that Alessa tried to use to prevent God being born. Oh, also it is worth noting that essentially this is an enemy called the Scraper. It's basically just like a common version of the missionary boss. That's the enemy that we face right before that sequence. Worth noting. Oh boy, this is gonna be a lot of stalker talk today. Holy shit. Oh. God, I love the look of the church. Like, it just goes on forever and ever, and just this haze. It gives this like very small environment this larger than life feeling. It's very cool. The door's open. Inside there's someone wrapped in a bag. Maybe. No, they're definitely dead. I got the Hanged Man tarot card. This was in that mortgage place. It's such a pitiful card. The Hanged Man tarot card actually represents Douglas. So, not too nice to be calling him pitiful there, Heather. Let's see, I think, yes, there is shotgun shells. Fuck yeah. Yeah, so we're going to be burning the shotgun just to get rid of some common enemies here. This is Harry's room. God, I love the sunset aesthetic of this part of the game. Just look at this. None of the books catch my eye. Although the bookshelf and books are all the same as Dad's. Stun gun battery. Lock's broken. But man, I love the aesthetic of this room. There's a musty diary on the bed. This writing. Is this Dad's diary? Why would it be here? I sometimes have the sense even now that that girl is a reincarnation of Alessa. I don't worry about it much now. That's all forgiven. You were unloved, Cheryl. Or was that Alessa? Now Cheryl is Alessa again. No matter whose reincarnation she may have been, that girl was my most beloved treasure. But that name was a mistake. At the time, I thought of her only as a replacement for my lost Cheryl. When she knows the truth, will she feel bad? That's what worries me. Thanks, Dad. So I was Alessa after all. But I do just have a trace of one more memory left. I haven't forgotten my sweet and gentle mother. Obviously not referencing Dahlia, referencing Harry's wife that passed away before the events of the first game. Cheryl's memories are included as well. A unique individual, reinforcing what I said earlier. This is just the final bit we get of Harry's character, and it's just to reinforce Harry deeply loves his daughter and deeply regrets how he initially saw Heather as just a replacement for his Cheryl, as he calls her, not as her own person. It really ties back to those themes of imposed identity that I haven't shut the fuck up about, but it's why Harry is the exception to the rule, where he does want Heather to be her own woman and have her own identity, and deeply regrets ever trying to impose something onto her. So it should be an enemy spawning. Let's fucking run. Lights. Oh shit. Yeah, let's heal. Bam. Okay, there we go. So we don't need to go back there. So I don't think we need to be worried about healing. I know one of these opens. There we go. Ah, God damn it. Eat shit. At least we don't have to listen to those goddamn bagpipes anymore. Okay, I mean, we got like 3 shells left. Okay, yeah, that's fine. Okay, this is fine for the final boss. I think we're good. I think we're stacked. What's over here? So what we see here is Valtiel fucking with a nurse model. I think, if I remember correctly, this is what was in that smoky room in Brookhaven that you can't see through the PS2 textures. So just a little reuse and just a way to reinforce Valtiel's always here. He's always watching. Like the Slender Man. And here we have a recreation of Alessa's room from the very first game. Got the brass key. Doesn't comment on the bugs. Interesting. I used to take these dolls with me when I went to bed. Scarlet and... Damn, I forgot the other one's name. In fact, I don't even know which one is Scarlet. This is some sort of landscape. Where's it from again? Well, it doesn't matter. A memo book. Something's written inside. She's just beyond this door. I don't know how, but I can sense it. But she's not the only one there. I sense the presence of something extremely dangerous, even sickening. Or maybe what they call God. Nevertheless, I will open the door. Enough of this idle chit-chat. God, I'm not, but I fully intend to save her. No. Them. Last entry was written some 17 years ago. Looks like Dad wrote this too. We'll read this on the second run. The scribbling on the floor here is Alessa's. For some reason, she always drew monsters like this when she was alone. She used to draw with Claudia, too. A nice daddy and mommy and a fun school. A happy world where everyone smiled and laughed all day long. In short, everything we never had. Now, if you look closely at the drawing there, the green figure resembles the closer a fair bit, actually. So that could potentially be the source of that enemy. The shelves are jammed with books. The top shelf has books on religious teachings and textbooks. Serious stuff. The other 2 shelves are full of fairy tale books, like Oz and Alice. Here's Mother Goose and Cinderella. I used to love these. My clothes from when I was 7. They don't fit me now. Good thing, too. This is a closet. It's meaningless to me. I don't have time to wax nostalgic over these old clothes. We'll examine that when we're doing the puzzle at the end. No, it wasn't me. Alessa wrote this a long time ago. That chapel altar. It wasn't that one beautiful chapel. It was some other altar somewhere else. The hidden church behind the antique shop that, I believe, Dahlia worked at. Let's see. Brass key. So I think, if I remember correctly... Oh, actually, wait. Can I go here? Oops. Whoops. Oh, this is it. I think this is the room that I want to discuss next. Just like the first game, the spirits of Alessa. And there we have him. There's Valtiel, spinning the red wheel with the two dangling legs, presumably of Alessa and Cheryl, above him. Spinning an endless loop, an endless wheel of rebirth. Those red drapes look very familiar to the stained glass window of God that we saw in the very beginning of the church. And also what draped God in the creation myth pictures. I think it's about time we talked about Valtiel as a character. Maybe we should back off, actually. Let's back off. Can we hear him? Yes, we can. Well, let's go through here. And we'll talk about Valtiel, because, actually, wait. I have an idea. So let's see if this works, because I want it on the screen, but that crank sound... Okay, thank God, because that crank sound is going to get real fucking old, real fucking quick. So let's do a deep dive into Valtiel. So the name Valtiel comes from the term Valet of God. His defined purpose is essentially just to make sure that God is born. But once again, repeating, God of this in this context is not actually a god, more so the embodiment of the dreamer, the dreamer's personal hang-up and trauma. It's eventually meant to get the biggest spike of negative emotion from the dreamer, so that the spiritual entities in the town can eat it, yank it, milk the dreamer dry, and throw him away. So if his defined purpose is to get that born, let's go over something else then. So, I talked earlier when we were going over Shaquille Barra and the painting of the connections Valtiel has to Pyramid Head. And when you think about it, their core roles are extremely similar in Silent Hill 2 and 3 for Pyramid Head and Valtiel, respectively. Valtiel guides and stalks Heather all throughout the game, leading her, as we'll see at the very end, to a final confrontation with the quote-unquote God. Pyramid Head, on the flip side, guides and stalks James all throughout his adventure, leading him to a final confrontation with Mary/Maria, in my opinion, his quote-unquote God. Because if you remember Silent Hill 2, there's multiple moments where James would be hard-locked throughout the game and would be unable to progress without Pyramid Head specifically doing something. So just as much as he is there as an executioner, he is there to guide James and lead him further and further along. Both Valtiel and Pyramid Head allow the protagonists to progress through their stories. Valtiel with controlling the otherworld for Heather to essentially traverse through Silent Hill, and Pyramid Head for the reasons we just described. Now, this is a quote from Masahiro Ito on the connection between Valtiel and Pyramid Head. And I quote, "In Silent Hill 3, the connection to the first game is quite clear. But the point of contact with the second game isn't obvious. I created Valtiel because I wanted to relate the works of the series through a creature. In the religion of Silent Hill, Valtiel exists as one who is close to God, and Pyramid Head takes the shape of Valtiel's reason to existence. That is to say, the Pyramid Head character was born from the townspeople's idolatrous ideologies. In the first game, the ceremonial robes were an homage to Valtiel. So if we really want to get woo-woo with it, and like fan-fiction-y with it, my theory is that Pyramid Head and Valtiel are the same core entity, but they appear radically different because you have two radically different people perceiving them. Whereas Pyramid Head is this dark mirror for James's own urges and repressed emotions, Valtiel is this constant stalker-like presence and a reminder of the lack of control Heather seemingly has over her life. Even more than Stanley fucking Coleman, the literal stalker character, Valtiel is just this constant voyeur. He's crawling around, he's staring at her, he's ever present, he never does anything. He's just there. It's this little subtle way of letting Heather know she can never escape him. And we discussed earlier, much earlier, how often the men in Silent Hill 3 are all initially presented in this very menacing, unclear way. Each have some sort of power over Heather and unclear intentions. Valtiel is the fucking epitome of this. He's this faceless, ever-present ghoul man whose intentions are so unclear that people are still kind of arguing about them. Excuse me. For the control aspect, as discussed much earlier, Valtiel actually drags off Heather's corpse in certain game overs, and this is confirmed by the developers, as we discussed a little earlier with the Yellow God section, to be him resurrecting Heather at the last save point. Even death, even that is not allowed to be an escape for Heather from the role of mother, because Valtiel will not allow that. He is Heather's specific mirror for her arc, the same way that Pyramid Head was for James, because if we're going for lore, I firmly believe they are one and the same entity, just perceived differently. This is what I mean by the closing of loops, or closing a circuit, where the dreamer and the person perceiving the entities in Silent Hill are just as much of a part of the phenomenon. And the amount of control Valtiel also shows over the course of events for this game is shown entirely through that valve handle motif. Silent Hill 3, as we have talked about ad nauseum, is all about cycles, repeating patterns, rebirth, and loops. And a reoccurring image is Valtiel spinning that wheel. Technically speaking, that is the first thing you see in the game during the game's opening FMV. That symbolism, it's plain as day fucking obvious at this point, I think. It's the literal loop of Heather's lives, to the cycle of abuse of Claudia's upbringing. Valtiel is not subject to this kind of cyclic hell, however. The point is, everyone else is subject to it. Valtiel is the one in control, turning the wheel. He's the one outside of the cycle. He is the ever-present. And it ties back to that core question, and why Valtiel, well, I do think it is a hipster take, and to be a little disparaging about it again, it's a hipster take that Valtiel is a better figure for narrative reasons than Pyramid Head, because he isn't, but he is kind of core to at least my reading of Silent Hill 3 with this omnipotent, ever-present power he seems to have over it. Almost like he's like the old god of like Soul Reaver in a way, like he exists outside the wheel. The core question of Silent Hill 3 though, can you escape or break the abusive and cruel cycles and systems in place, or will you always succumb to them in the end? Valtiel is the one spinning that cycle. One last thing. So we went over that the 5 tarot cards we're going to collect are going to represent 5 characters in the plot. The God, Vincent, Douglas, and as we'll get for the last 2 cards, Claudia and Heather. There is a 6th card character represented by the tarot card according to the Book of Lost Memories. and that's Valtiel. Valtiel's tarot card is number 1, the Magician. And we'll talk about that when we get to the final tarot puzzle. About why that's interesting. Okay. It's the sick room from Silent Hill 1. Looks like there's some kind of drugs here. But there's just a name on the label. No description or anything. It's too risky. Never mind. "24 years ago, Dahlia used me to summon God. God was in my womb, but I couldn't deliver her. Then I was shut up here in this hospital room. I stayed here until Dad helped me out when I was 14. God ate away at me from within, driving me mad of suffering. There I was, wishing I could just die and be done with it. But I went on living that nightmare for 7 years. Looking at this bed just reminds me of those awful days. And I don't want to remember them, because I'm not Alessa anymore. But Alessa is still me. I'm really not trying to deny it or anything. I don't want to remember. Get me out of here." And there we have it. I think this may be one of the first times in the game where Heather definitively says, I am not Alessa anymore. I am my own person. The third act, Heather is finally actually taking charge of her own identity. She's finally getting the opportunity to be her own woman. There's a picture here, but it's not my style at all. I got an ampoule. It's a picture of me when I was 7. I look bored and sad. Well, of course I do. I was always like that back then. There's something stuck in this book. I got the Fool tarot card. This book. Well, actually, we'll talk about it in a second. I feel like I have to read it, but at the same time, I don't want to. The Glophitis. Red liquid or crystals resembling blood. According to the Kabbalah, the name is taken from an herb with the power to dispel evil spirits. It is said to grow in Arabian deserts. It may be vaporized or applied as a poultice to guard against demons. It is powerful, but as it is rare, it is extremely difficult to obtain. The Glophitis, if you remember Silent Hill 1, is the sticky red liquid thingy that basically fucks with Silent Hill phenomenon, where Harry uses a bottle of it that he collects to save Sybil, and Kaufman in the good ending uses a bottle of it on Alessa to prevent the full birth of God, which leads to it coming out incomplete as the incubus. Now, sticky red liquid, where did we find that? Where on earth? Dad gave me this pendant on my birthday. It's one of my treasured belongings. There's a jewel inside, like a little red tablet. When I asked Dad what it was, he said, just a lucky charm. But then he told me to take good care of it and never take it off. I wonder why I feel sick inside when I look at it. I wonder why indeed. I actually wonder. If I examine that at the beginning of the game, does Heather say that line? Holy shit, I think I just discovered something new about this game. I don't think she says the I feel sick about it line until after she meets Claudia. Oh shit. Oh, I'm gonna have to look into that actually. Oh, that's good. This game's still fucking surprising me, man. I got the Fool tarot card. This is in my old room. In a hospital room. What did this one mean again? So the Fool card represents Heather. Oh man, I'm actually kind of excited now. Holy fucking shit, dude. I'm still finding things about Silent Hill 3. Oh man, this fucking game is so good. Why is its pacing so weird? I wish I could just praise it blindly and just say every part of it is amazing. Why is its pacing so weird? Okay, yes, okay, I'm going the right way. Ignore the bagpipes. Oh boy, okay, so in the elevator, I'm going to turn my page over because I need to do that. Oh boy. I actually screwed up. I should have done a little discussion there in the Heather sick room. So you know what? We're gonna progress a little bit because I missed a cue. Let's go save the game. And you know what? This actually is a happy accident that kind of works out. Because we get a little view of Heather's face. Let's scroll down a little bit. There we go. Let's get kind of an uninterrupted view of Heather's reflection here. And let's do a Heather Mason deep dive character discussion. Really let's just end most of my thoughts on Heather's character. Because she's a really interesting kind of protagonist. Well, she is fairly fleshed out, and she feels very much like a real person. Like, she's definitely an achievement in that regard, where it's like, she feels like a real human being and a fully fleshed out character. She's so simple and straightforward as a character at the end of the day. She's blunt, direct, wears her heart on her sleeve, and really doesn't have any hidden, like, depth or darkness. It's not that she's a flat character, she's a simple character. She's the polar opposite of the fucking miasma that is James Sunderland from the previous game. Most enemy symbolism relates to the Alessa rebirth cycle, or the concepts of pregnancy and childbirth, which Heather herself really doesn't have much of a tie to. I do think that might actually be one of the reasons why this game's story isn't as well regarded by people. Outside of how it can be a little convoluted with being a direct sequel to the first game, and the very odd pacing, and if I could be blunt, just not going far enough with certain topics, such as the teenage pregnancy and forced childbirth angle. Just not going far enough, despite being a good effort, and still having some interesting ideas and things to say about it. I think the fact that the enemies are so, and the enemy symbolism is so removed from Heather as a character herself, and she really isn't hiding anything. Like, while people do complain, and rightfully so, I complain about it, of the Western Silent Hill games just being a repeat of Silent Hill 2, I think there is a subset of the audience that is more satisfied with that structure, where the character you're playing as has some sort of deeper darkness. They have something they're hiding from the player that you have to uncover and pick apart through symbolism and specifically the enemies they face. There's a reason that formula was the one that the series copied going forward. It seems to resonate with people more. Whether or not that's better is up for debate. I don't actually think so. The what made Silent Hill 2 was execution, not formula. I digress, though. But despite going back to the talk, despite being the main character of the game, honestly, going back to it, I don't have much to say about Heather herself specifically. She is dirt simple and straightforward. However, as I've said ad nauseum, the idea of forced identity is everywhere in Silent Hill 3, and it really is Heather's core character conflict. Harry initially does it, Douglas does it, Claudia does it, the cult does it by extension of Claudia, Stanley does it, Leonard kinda does it, but he's already kind of far gone, so that's a stretch. But looking back on all of that, at really at no point does Heather truly push back on an identity given to her of, no, this is who I am. She doesn't ever really specifically push back against them. Okay, this is poor phrasing, excuse me. But essentially what I'm getting at is, I don't think Heather doesn't push back because I don't think Heather knows who Heather is. If we can do a little bit of projection and interpretation, I think part of the reason that she's so simple and straightforward is that she doesn't quite know who she is. Largely because I don't think she's had the opportunity to find out who she is. We've been hinting at it as we've been going, but let's look at Heather's life at the start of the game. We can infer from Douglas's notebook that she was probably homeschooled since she's legally 24 despite actually being 17. She was moved around while growing up for her own safety due to the cult trying to capture her. It doesn't seem like she really has any friends or close connections outside of her father. And once he's dead, that sole fixed source of stability is gone. It's also possibly why Heather dislikes mirrors. Outside of the whole past lives aspects and repressed memories, Heather lacks a solid sense of self, and a reflection would kind of remind her of that. And this is why ultimately I do think Silent Hill 3 is pretty much the peak of the coming of age story. And Heather's arc is all about her initially content to live within the structure her father gives her in the first act. The second act, defaulting to the past lives of Alessa as her new identity. And for the third act and the ending, trying to finally find her own voice for herself, rejecting the imposition of even her own past lives, challenging Claudia directly on her worldview, even as goofy as the whole checkmate church scene is. Heather's arc, I think the thing is that I would say about Heather's character arc is that she doesn't necessarily change as a character. This is a game about Heather getting the opportunity to change as an individual, the opportunity to determine who she'll become, which she never had at any point up to there. There we go. Homestretch, folks. We have 2 more character discussions in the ending. Oh boy. I forgot how good the save theme is, actually. Very soothing. It was actually helped me focus a lot there. Uh-oh. Uh-oh. Okay, let's reset that. That was a... Okay. Now this is where we're going to get to more of the sort of like rot angle of everything's falling apart now. Everything's collapsing. It all returns to nothing. It all comes tumbling down, tumbling down, tumbling down. Hey, it's Voltiel again. Go home. Drop dead. Thief. This used to be Alessa's. I mean, this was my desk once upon a time. There's a ratty old notebook on the podium. Oops. And there's a letter stuck in here too. Let's see. There's a girl named Alessa in my class. If your memory is any good, you may remember her. She's the one I said they called a witch. Most likely, her mother is abusing her. I've never seen her come in without some sort of scrape or bruise. Her expression is pitifully dark for a 6-year-old. Something like this may not be so uncommon. Rather than coming up with pointless ideas, it's best to just watch and wait. Well, isn't there something I can do to help? I'm considering consulting a lawyer, but I do have my reservations. That's why I thought I'd ask you, my friend, for your opinion first. K. Gordon. Kim Gordon. Sonic Youth reference aside, this actually ties back to Silent Hill 1, where, if you remember correctly, the teacher K. Gordon and the K. Gordon key was how Harry, when he left Midwich Elementary, was able to progress through the story. So, it seems to be like a little bit of a retcon that the reason why in Silent Hill 1 Alessa would have reference for Kim Gordon is it's the only adult in her life at that point that even attempted to help her. Explains why she'd have a little bit of reference. Okay, we got a few rooms here. Is this the murder room? This is the murder room. I think this is the room I don't want to go to yet. We'll discuss that next, but I think this is the one I want to go to. Is this it? Yes, it is. Okay, so just a moment here. I will be back shortly.
A few moments later.
Okay, and we are back. Let me just double check my microphone. 1, 2, 3, and a 1, 2, 3, and step back and forth. Then a 1, 2, 3. Oh yeah. So let's get this card on the table. I got the High Priestess Tarot card. Didn't this card mean something like genuine belief? Obviously, the High Priestess Tarot card represents Claudia. Just like her. Only card that has that kind of description. Interesting. So this is Claudia's room. Let's give it a little read to see what's around here. This bookshelf is nothing special. The name Claudia Wolf is written very small on the cover. Looks like this is her diary. November 10th. She didn't die then. She was born. I knew that for a fact. But then why haven't I found her yet? They were supposed to need her power to build paradise, for the happiness of the people. She was supposed to be reborn for that. I'd really like to see her. November 14th. Read the Book of Praise. I want to thank Father for lending me such an invaluable book. I found what I had been searching for in there, how to awaken God, but it's much too cruel. Will I be able to pull it off when I see her? November 16th. I was free all day, so I read A Modern History of Refugees and Young Slaves, Child Exploitation. I don't want to be a mere bystander in this world. I can't do anything now, though, and that's what's hard. There's an old birthday card on the desk. So she was still hanging on to this. To little Claudia, happy 6th birthday. I love you as if you were my real sister. Here's to you. And there's nothing else. That's it. This is Claudia's life. So let's talk about Claudia. Let's finally really deep dive into her character. Because this room tells us all we need to know about her. There's a diary, some books just about tragedy, like modern slavery, her religious texts of her death cult, and a single birthday card from Alessa that she got probably about maybe 25 years ago. That's it. Notice how prominently this card is displayed as well. That's the only thing beyond a lamp on her desk. Claudia has absolutely fucking nothing. Her hyperfixation on her one friend, and with all of the pain and the suffering of the world, all of this starts making more sense why she won't shut the hell up about it. That's it. That is the only thing that she engulfs herself in daily. And mix that with her father's devout faith in a death cult that was literally beat into her fucking skull. That's how you get a Claudia. Her calm, stoic mask breaking over the course of the game shows her true self, as we've already discussed. Naive, overly emotional, immature, and alone. Claudia essentially is in a state of arrested development. She never really matured past that sad, abused 6-year-old girl who had a single friend in the world that made it tolerable. Vincent, as much of a piece of shit as he is, was 100% right about Claudia's faith. It was a desperate cry for approval, for love, for anything. It wasn't faith. She may believe it now, but I don't think it ever truly was. And when you mix her father's dogma and obsession with Alessa, this isn't even a love. This is an obsession with an idea of someone you knew almost 30 years ago. Let's face it. You mix those two facts together, and it makes what is her true god, Alessa. Alessa is Claudia's god. All of her discussion of how good God is, all of her faith, everything she projects, all of it is just a cry for one person that treated her well 25 years ago. It's not a true faith. Vincent's absolutely correct about it. Something that is interesting to me about Claudia, though, is that, as it says in her journal over here, it's not as if she is outwardly malicious. She does have a deep desire to do good, to alleviate suffering within the world. Her leisure time is spent reading about modern slavery, for fuck's sake, some of the darkest aspects of modern life. She doesn't want to be a mere bystander in this world, by her own admission. That is a noble intent. The issue is then it's mixed together with this obsessive fixation on someone like Alessa and her father's dogma that was beaten into her. Once again, I gotta highlight, the real villain of this game is Leonard Wolf. He's the one responsible for all of this shit. And when you mix together the death cult dogma, the obsession with Alessa as her true god, and the need to be a proactive savior, that's how you get the burn it all down, flames will result in paradise nonsense that Claudia is espousing. The only way to save the world from suffering is to burn the fucker to the ground. It's that kind of greater good mentality that lets her justify forcing a teenage girl to suffer through a forced pregnancy of her god, which will probably result in her dying. But that's for the greater good, because everyone's going to suffer. I think this is why Claudia is the perfect foil for Heather and how we've discussed her character arc. And really the perfect antagonist for a coming-of-age story about breaking tradition in cycles like this. Whereas Heather's story is about like forming your own identity free from anything imposed on you and actually trying to be an active force in forming your own life, Claudia's story is about a 30-something-year-old woman that has fallen victim to her life, that's fallen victim to the imposed identity, and flipped it. She embraces it now. She embraces the beliefs, the systems, and the dogmas of her abusers and her oppressors, and fully intends to force all of them on everyone else. Despite claiming to love Alessa, Claudia, ironically, is repeating the exact same actions as Alessa's mother, Dahlia, by forcing Heather into the role of God's mother. That itself was the reason her friend was taken from her, but she seems too blind to understand that. And the best part of this all is that even in taking an active role in trying to kickstart the apocalypse, essentially, from her perspective, and forcing the birth of the cult's god, Claudia really has no agency or any real identity of her own here. She's the monster her father created, emulating a plan, or not even emulating, almost one-to-one enacting a plan that Dahlia created. She's doing what her forebears expected of her to do, at no point stopping to question what she would actually want for herself, only what must be done. She is fatalistic and suicidally traditional. A fascinatingly pathetic character. I love her. I will say, doing work for this playthrough in particular really made me appreciate the Claudia character and how shockingly well written as a villain she is. Absolutely one of the most fascinating horror antagonists I've seen in a video game. Very underrated. Frankly, underrated. Actually, wait. There are a bunch of books here. Nothing particularly interesting. Okay, well, Let's read this. What are these? Letters? No. Maybe a bunch of suggestions? People are starting to voice their dissatisfaction about Father Vincent using the organization's money for his own personal benefit. I've also heard rumors that Father Vincent has been extorting donations from some followers. Is he really the right person for such a position? I'm in no place to deny all he's done to make the organization grow. Even though we believe in God, if there were some sort of gathering, shouldn't we be valued not for our limited talents or our talkativeness, or for the depth of our faith? LS. There's a tape deck here. Looks useful.
Do you know about what happened here 17 years ago? You've been here a long time. You must have heard some details.
A group of pagans, blinded by earthly desires, spit in the very face of God. They tried to use the seal of Metatron to prevent God's awakening. But God drove the unbelievers away and threw them into the abyss. But due to their wickedness, God was unable to be born properly. And so, she has slumbered ever since, in the womb of the Holy Mother, until the time of the awakening. That's all that I know.
That's it, huh? Well, thanks.
Father Vincent, I heard that the Holy Mother has been found. Is it true?
Alessa has been found? Did Claudia say that?
Yes.
Then it must be true. Her sight rarely fails her.
Bless the Lord.
Maybe it's because of her great faith. But I could never be like her. I wouldn't want to.
Nor I. The truth is, Sister Claudia frightens me a little.
Well now, let's both show our faith by forgetting about this little talk, okay?
Yes, but does that mean this land will finally be the home of eternal paradise?
If God wills it, my sister. If God wills it.
So let's talk about Vincent, since this is probably his room. So the taped conversation here between Vincent and the cult member really helps reinforce my views on Vincent, alongside all the prior mentioned details. That whichever you like, kind of like flippant response to Heather, the entire conversation between him and Claudia in the motel room, the fraud allegations on the table there, how in his very first encounter, he's presented with this sing-songy, odd, uncanny way of speaking, like the Silent Hill 2, allegedly how Silent Hill 2 voice acting worked. But he drops the act immediately and just becomes like a pity, like kind of like a petty, angry guy the second Heather walks away and doesn't entertain him. It all goes to reinforce what I think about Vincent, is that I don't think he believes in a single goddamn thing that he's saying about the cult. I think he has been fraudulent from the moment he got in here. Whether he was born into the cult or if he joined as an adult after the debacle in Silent Hill 1, it doesn't really matter. It's clear that Vincent gained power in the wake of the ending of Silent Hill 1, where the two real figureheads of Dahlia and Kaufman were essentially killed, and everyone was left scrambling. So he got authority in the church, he built it up, he got power within it, and now is starting to use the cult as his own personal piggy bank, essentially. Vincent's a liar. He's absolutely a fraud, a con man, and essentially a carny. But I think there's one time he is 100% truthful, and that is when he's talking with Claudia in the motel room. And he says that he knows the pleasures of this world, and he's gonna get it while he's here. He doesn't believe in God. He doesn't believe in the cult. It's a means to an end, and these dupes are the ones getting him his paycheck. His uncanny speech pattern and all his little theatrics, it's on act. The angry, petty Vincent, the one who's just who wants to flippantly disregard all conversation and just get his, that's the real Vincent. That's the real guy. Flip the page here. But this is why it's like, he's a dirt simple character. Like, he's really, there's nothing deep to Vincent. He is a petty piece of shit who just wants money and comfort and authority over a tiny little group that he can milk. But what spurs him to action to where, don't forget, his original plan was to probably kill Heather. Find the only one, kill her. That picture. His plan is probably to fucking kill her. So what actually spurs him to action there? Well, let's say you're Vincent. Let's put ourselves in his shoes. You don't believe in a single goddamn thing you've ever said, but you're taking advantage of this cult to make sure that you're making like a 6+ figure salary annually. Alright? What happens if one of the rubes that you're playing off of with your little doomsday cult comes up to you and says, Father Vincent, God's been found. God's going to be born, Father. It's wonderful. And then you realize that maybe it wasn't bullshit. Maybe the cult was real. And maybe you're about to face some real wrath of God, Old Testament consequences for your fraud. You would do fucking anything to prevent that from happening. I think Vincent now believes, but he's only believing as a means to trying to get his ass out of jail, essentially. He doesn't want God to be born, because God being born means that his ass is probably grass, and he's going to do anything at all to prevent that. Well, at the end, he is, I guess, technically doing the right thing. You gotta remember, because his initial plan is to kill Heather, the dude's still a total scumbag. He's really one of the more refreshed. After we went into all the depth of Claudia as a character, the contradictions of her, Vincent's just a fun, simple bastard. Claudia's probably the best written character in the game, but Vincent is probably my favorite. He's just such a fuck. And that's it. Oh shit. Okay. Run. Later. Alright, this is it, the last run. We are at the final endgame here. Actually in the home stretch this time, folks. We got the final boss and the ending. And then that is the end of Silent Hill 3. And like Silent Hill 1, the Nowhere section, the nightmare is crumbling around us now. The end is near, folks. It's a good thing, too, that we got rid of all the enemies, because usually around this part is when I just get a lot of cheap shots from the missionary, the little mini missionaries that run around here. Oh. Come on. And here we are. Let's read this. This is my sketchbook from 17 years ago. On the front cover here is a picture of Dad. Really awful work. What's this doing here? The door sure does rattle, but it's stuck tight. A secret is hidden out of your sight. You may be thinking, what could it be? You'll need 5 magic cards if you want to see. What to do then with all of these? I'll tell you straight, and I won't tease, just as long as you say please. Now the first thing you must know is that there's something in each row, but that is not the half of it. 3 would be too hard to fit. The upside down man, under the ground. To his right, to his left, there's no one around. Leave him alone, though, his tears are profound. The moon is up above the sky, full or crescent, floating high. Twinkling light sits like a crown on the head of a crazy clown. Your Excellency, praying to a god most high, do you think you can tell me why you always look up at the night sky? Do you have it now? You didn't forget? One major point you must not omit, and now at the last, before you take a whack, here's one more hint to help keep you on track. Scary and hateful, that thing in the night. Better be careful, it's not on your right. Turn to the left, and you'll keep it in sight. So you'll open the door? I'm just sure that I'll be there. Fuck. I can read English. I'm just sure that there will be nothing beyond it but frightening peril. Forget about that. Just stay and play, or else I'll be left here alone all day. So let's put the cards in. Now, the order that you place the tarot cards in, thematically and symbolically, is irrelevant because it changes depending on the difficulty. So really, for storytelling, it's completely irrelevant. What does matter is what the cards represent. So, you know what? No, we'll talk about it and then we'll solve quickly. So, what it represents is that Heather, Claudia, Vincent, Douglas, and even the God, they're just cards in a deck. They're pieces on a board. They're pawns. But as said earlier, Valtiel is also represented by a tarot card as the Magician. And notice how that's the one character that is not represented here. That is the one represented character that has a representative card that has no play on the playing board here. This ties back to what we were talking about when we were doing the Valtiel character discussion, and also about the idea of like fate, cycles, breaking them, yada yada yada. Valtiel is the one outside of this game. He's the one in control of the cycles. He's turning the wheel. All of the others, everyone else here, including the god itself, is just a pawn in the game. And now, we're going to put all the pieces in place. All the playing pieces are on the board. Will Heather escape the cycle? Will she succumb to it? Well, one way to find out. This is the end game, folks. Oh boy. Okay, so we got one last kind of cool thing to discuss before... Wait, where's my last save? There it is. Let's go. So what's really cool about this last run is that this is intentionally mirroring the camera angles of Harry's first descent into the Otherworld in Silent Hill 1. And the last thing we see is the rotational fan imagery once more. The cycle continues. The beginning is the end. The fate of destruction is also the joy of rebirth. Let's finish this.
What do I want? Well, for the two of you to die, that would be nice. Then I could relax.
When did you stop believing in God? God lives. Just look around you.
But I do believe in her. In my own way. I fear her, and I adore her. But I haven't lost my mind like you. You think that this is the work of God? Isn't this all nothing more than your own personal nightmare? Just like Alessa 17 years ago? If this really is the work of God, then I'd say she has lousy taste.
You mock God? Traitor. You will go to hell.
Not that again! Who do you think you are, claiming to know God's will?
Go home, Vincent.
Home. This church is my home. I built it with my power. The power of money that you view with such scorn. Although I admit that this atrocious scenery is all yours.
If you continue to get in my way,
Then you kill me? Well. Well. The guest of honor has arrived. Let's get this party started. Heather, go ahead and kill this crazy bitch. This demon who claims to speak for God. The time has come. You can kill her now.
you'll go to hell!
What did you do?
Nothing important.
You're not going to run? I guess this is the end.
No, the beginning. As Vincent said, the time has come. Alessa, I'm saddened that you didn't agree to this on your own. But I thank you for nurturing God with all the hate in your heart. It's time for mankind to be released from the shackles of sin which bind them.
But a god born from hatred can never create a perfect paradise.
Happy people can be so cruel. Is it so hard to believe that sympathy could be born out of pain and suffering? Why do you reject God's mercy? Why do you cling to this corrupt world? You know that only God can save us.
And save you too? Happy ending? I'd rather go to hell.
No, I I've caused you, I deserve no mercy. Even if it was to save mankind, it was too deep a sin. It was hubris for me to try to hasten the day of her arrival. Sacrifices were made. And those are my sins.
If you feel so guilty about it, why don't you go to hell? Heather, use the seal.
Vincent? The seal of Metatron?
Now your stupid dream is over.
Oh, that's just a piece of junk. What do you think you can do with that? Do you really think it can kill God? I'm sorry to see you fell for my father's foolishness.
What?
You're pathetic. But God loves even you. Now, Alessa, there's nowhere else to run. Just accept it, Alessa. The pain will disappear. I've been waiting so long for this. Even as a child, I knew I would see the coming of this day. I knew I would be a witness to it. Judgment Day. Alessa?
Shut your stinking mouth, bitch!
Get away from her, you bitch! Okay, so we got a lot to talk about there, but we'll take a minute to discuss it. Interesting fact, this is actually where you get an optional game over, is if you take the gun and you shoot Claudia. As we discussed earlier, by giving in to that anger and hatred, it feeds the god and it hastens the birth, and game over. So we're not going to do that. But before we do anything else, let's just discuss the cutscene up to this point. Vincent really just shows his true colors here. That line for the, like, I want both of you to die, that'd be nice. Like, that's Vincent in a fucking nutshell. He just wants this over and done with and these two idiots out of his life. I do like his line about how the atrocious scenery around them is Claudia's, because it's another hint to my personal interpretation of the game that it's a two otherworld situation, where you're seeing a merging between Alessa's and Claudia's. So it's a mixture of the two. But Claudia's final speech, outside of being a great performance by Donna Burke here, really just sums up her suffering-centric worldview, and almost like this bitter hatred of anyone who had it better than her. Because, like, yeah, you're cruel and evil because you didn't suffer the way I suffered. I'm superior because of that. Which, it is understandable. It's the only thing that she can, like, kind of grasp onto. On top of how it's like she just can't let go of her delusions and obsessions with Alessa, despite even at the end openly admitting she won't be saved. She knows that she cannot be forgiven for her actions, but as we discussed during the Claudia deep dive, she thinks that's all worth it. Because other people told her it was worth it. Not gonna think for herself, even at the very fucking end. So, why didn't the seal of Metatron work? I can't use that here. Why didn't this work? Well, basically, in my opinion, if everything in Silent Hill and in the Fog, and especially the Otherworld, is reliant on belief and personal hang-ups to work, I think it just boils down to that. There's a lack of belief that the Seal of Metatron would ever work. Heather doesn't believe it's going to work because she doesn't know anything about the cult and its theology, outside of like vague memories of Alessa, who she's already rejected the identity of. Claudia doesn't believe it's going to work, so she thinks it's a piece of garbage. And Vincent doesn't believe it's going to work, because I don't think Vincent believes in a single goddamn thing that's going on. He's essentially, right now, just being Benny from the Mummy remake, the Brendan Fraser one, where he's just pulling out any religious talisman to try to get the mummy to fuck off. That's Vincent in this scene. It's a last Hail Mary to, like, maybe the symbol will just magically fix my problem. But there is one way to stop it. The Aglophidus. The gift from Harry. Only way to stop it.
What are you doing?
Dad.
She is nearly here. Alessa, what have you done? What did you swallow? What is this?
Looks like God didn't make it.
Stop! God is...
Claudia!
Alessa, you cannot kill God. I will burn God. If you can't do it, Alessa, I will.
Claudia!
And there we have it. I don't know what's more metal, the ending of Silent Hill 1 where like Satan with titties explodes from a chick's back and you gotta shoot it to death, or this where Heather vomits up and Claudia eats and presumably goes down to birth the fetus of God. That's fucking awesome. I don't know what's more metal, this or the first game. But the final boss is God. Let's talk about the Book of Lost Memories description of the God. We'll see it in a minute, but I just want to talk about a few things for the boss fight, because it's actually pretty challenging, all things considered. As a result of being born from Claudia's womb, its form is close to the image of God she believed in, that of Alessa. So, this hard confirms that, quote-unquote, the God is Claudia's monster, not Heather's. It's a symbolic representation of her own biggest trauma. Alessa as depicted as her God, like Mary and / Maria was for James at the end of Silent Hill 2. Silent Hill 2 is not a total standalone story, it is vital to the trilogy, brings it all together. I'm going to keep hammering that in until people stop lying about that. But here's the thing, so if at the very end here, God is Claudia's monster, what if, now tinfoil hat time, fanfiction time, what if the God was always Claudia's monster? The game, fortunately, to not, gross us out, it never addresses how Heather became pregnant in the first place. But what if it wasn't through the traditional method, so to speak? What if it only came into existence in this immaculate birth style in the fog / otherworld only once Claudia and Heather were in the same room together? If I remember correctly, the line of Heather looking at the Aglophidus and saying it makes her feel sick doesn't happen when you first look at it before she meets Claudia. And the first time that she has the headaches and the keeling over pain, like the birthing cramps, that only happens when she meets Claudia, who's the second half of this other world. I don't know. It's worth considering, I think. And it kind of does answer what I guess you could argue is a bit of a plot hole of the game. How exactly was God born? And if that's the case, it would work for the town's goal of inflicting trauma on two people, on both the dreamers, of Heather and Claudia, to trigger those negative emotions that it feeds on. Heather for the physical pain and the body horror aspect of being subjected to this immaculate birth of God demon thing, and Claudia because it's merging her fanatical faith and obsession with Alessa to create the fucking monster we're gonna see in a minute. Because really, I think we said everything we gotta say about the cult. We got the creation stories on the walls over here. We said everything we have to say about the God and everything. So, only thing worth talking about is its physical design, which we'll look at in a second here. here it is, the god. Let's get a look at it with this little pause menu here. So the design is interesting because, as we saw before Baltiel gave the covering, it's physically a resemblance of both the church's stained glass window depiction of God, complete with now the face covering, and also Alessa's face. That may as well be the same face and eyes of the memory of Alessa. Well, not eyes, excuse me, face and hair memory of Alessa. The same head model, essentially. It's the combination of Claudia's two primary obsessions, warped and mangled and incomplete. This disgusting abomination of everything she ever held dear. Claudia probably got to see just enough of it before dying, too. Just got to have that little moment of regret, which I find interesting. The veil it wears, as well as the fact that the god's eyes are closed and will not open, as we'll see during the fight, this is meant to resemble a death mask rather than an actual face, which is the greatest tragedy of all and the greatest source of trauma for Claudia. It is a constant reminder that Alessa is dead and gone. Nothing Claudia could do or would be able to do here could have changed anything. And her inability to accept any of this, to ever escape that, that's why Claudia's dead. And that's why the god's here. And that's why they're putting this bitch out of its misery. So this is an annoying fight, but let's fucking go! Okay, so we're gonna... The primary strategy really is... Let's just do that. Ouch. So because of the controller issues, I'm gonna have some problems in this fight. So, that's not fun. And also, you cannot get close enough to release the shotgun, which sucks because it's easily the strongest weapon in the game. But, yeah, there's not much to say. This is just surprisingly difficult as a fight, so I'm gonna do my level best to not have the first playthrough death here. I will say only downside is I think this is the weakest of all the boss themes. Which is... ah, fuck. Alright, so... boom, boom. Alright, so she hasn't started doing the tubes yet, so... we're not quite at the halfway point. Oh, there we go. And yep, okay, well, pistol only time. Let's go, kids. And this is why, for this boss fight, you never get rid of the pistol. Ouch. This is why you never get rid of the pistol, and never waste the ammo for it, because it's really the easiest way to deal with the final boss. And just kind of do that, and reload again. 1, 2, and 4, 5, forward, and around. Ah, fuck. But as you can see, you take a lot of damage. So, kind of lame, but what are you gonna do? It's like, I'd say it's probably my least favorite final boss in anything, just because, like, it's genuinely difficult, which is kind of weird, because, like, these are not, like, gameplay games. Silent Hill 3 admittedly is the best of them, but you can easily, like, soft lock yourself with how genuinely challenging this fight is. Like, I don't even know if you can beat this thing with melee. Honestly, I don't even think it's possible to do this with guns. I don't know, maybe someone can let me know if there's like a Silent Hill 1 clause, like if you run out of bullets completely and just survive with a minute, technically the boss just dies on its own, which was a thing in Silent Hill 1, so maybe that's the thing in here. But I don't know. I don't think so. I'm just gonna pray that I don't run out of bullets. Because this is... Alright, let's actually do an ammo count here just to make sure we're doing good, because I'm blowing through a lot here. Okay, no, we're fine. Okay, we're fine. We have more than enough. This is why you need to have, like, minimum 100 ammo bullets coming into this. Yeah, like, it's...
Is that the end? I guess it's time to roll the credits.
Dad! Dad!
Not yet. You're still alive.
Heather, what, Heather?
Oh! Just a joke.
You've got terrible taste.
I'm sorry.
Heather, did
You
you...
don't have to call me that. I'm not hiding anymore.
You want me to use your real name? What was it again?
Cheryl. The name my father gave me.
You gonna let your hair color go back too?
I don't know. Don't you think blondes have more fun?
And that is Silent Hill 3. I can't believe it's done. We did it. Oh my god, the fucking credits. Oh no, there we go. There we go. So I actually don't like the end credits theme very much. It's also a little distracting to me, but that's it. That's Silent 3. We'll discuss the meaning in a minute, but I do like this last shot of a proper burial for Harry that Heather gets. Yeah, I'm not a fan of this end credits song. No offense, but it doesn't work. Just a more subdued ambient track, just for the end here. So, I can't be alone in thinking that this ending's kind of weak, right? And there is Silent Hill 1's ending is dirt simple, but there's just more gravitas and atmosphere at the end. And Silent Hill 2's ending is ignoring which of the multiples you get the letter reading. And it is the single strongest piece of voice acting in gaming to this day. And I will die on that fucking hill. But this just kind of comes off as a wet fart, if I'm being blunt. But that's not for a lack of trying, because there's a single detail that's cut from the ending that fucking ruins it. Utterly fucking ruins the ending of the game. So, in the making of documentary, the making of Silent Hill 3, you actually get the original cut of this ending, of what happens. So when Heather is walking away from the corpse of the god, after she has the cry over her father, walks away, and she looks back at the camera suddenly. Why does she do that? Well, in the making of, you hear what causes her to look back. A baby crying.
So nothing is ever black and white.
Is that the end?
Everything is always relative.
I guess it's time to roll the credits.
Including you, especially when you find out who you really are.
A baby's cry of a newborn baby being born from the corpse of the god, just like the ending of Silent Hill 1. The cycle repeats anew. It begins again. It is happening again. So suddenly, that silly little ending of Heather suddenly acting way more peppy and over the top. Of, oh, don't you think blondes have more fun? Just joke, ha ha ha, everything's fine. Suddenly, that ending's a lot stronger with that detail. She's faking it. She's faking the jokey, happy-go-lucky attitude. It's not fun. What does it mean? Who fucking knows what it means? And the fact that Silent Hill 3 ends on a note of ambiguity like that, I really love. And the fact that they cut that single audio file from the game is such a fucking mistake. Ruins the ending completely. But let's go forward with the knowledge in mind that a baby's cry, a new birth from the corpse of God, is what caused her to look back. Let's go forward with that in mind. So, let's ask a question. What is the baby? Who or what is it? Well, the easy answer would be the fourth incarnation of Asa, right? There's all those examples of fours and a fourth cycle being bad, which would give this a very bleak conclusion of Heather did nothing, she is doomed to the cycle, she will repeat it again. And there's some minor things pointing towards that, including the fact that she's intending to change her name and revert it back to Cheryl, which means this literally just is a repeat of the ending of Silent Hill 1. The failed birth of God results in a born child from the carcass, and a new Cheryl leaves the town of Silent Hill. It's the same ending again. It all repeats. But here's the thing. I don't think it is a new incarnation, because don't forget, there was a difference this time. Heather, the third incarnation of Alessa, did not birth God. She had nothing to do with it this time. Claudia birthed God. So in my opinion, that's not Heather 4, that's Claudia 2. That is a new incarnation of Claudia, because don't forget, she willingly took the God into her womb and birthed it. And we see her body disappear completely. We only see her robe that she wore throughout the game. At the end of Silent Hill 1, Alessa disappears the exact same way when she hands off the baby to Harry as he escapes. And if this in mind, that Heather is no longer beholden to the cycle, while Claudia is, and the cycle begins anew but with a new host, this ties into my take on the ending and my final closing thoughts on Silent Hill 3. As said earlier, the core question that Silent Hill 3 keeps going back to is if it is truly possible to escape different cycles and systems holding you back, or if you're just gonna succumb to them eventually. Everything ties back to this. The rebirth and reincarnation stuff, the childbirth and pregnancy stuff, the women-centric horror stuff with the vague themes of feminism that frankly are ahead of its time for a game that came out in 2003. And even the lore of Silent Hill itself, how the town works, how the monsters work. It all ties back. Can you ever escape these systems, these cycles in place? The answer to said question is that yes, you can. You are not beholden to the cycle, to cycles, to the destiny, to anything in place like that. You may not be able to break them individually, however. What matters most, though, is if you truly wish to form your own path and forge ahead on your own, it is possible. Like Silent Hill 2. Silent Hill 2 is a bleak, depressing game, but it ends on that note of hope, of redemption is possible through true penance. You are not too far gone. That is the ultimate message of Silent Hill 2. Silent Hill 3's ultimate message is you are not beholden to your past. You are not slave to what came before, to your system and circumstance that you were born into. It will not be easy, but you can form your own identity. And that's why it's perfect that Heather gets essentially a clean start. Fresh slate to start from zero, start from scratch. And why Claudia is now stuck in the cycle that she was once stuck in. Because Claudia at no point considered that a possibility. She saw the cycle. She saw what came before as the only way to continue, as the only way to live, and she sought out to force others into that worldview. She knows best because everyone else before her knew best, and she's damn well gonna make sure you know it. And that's why Claudia, being the next incarnation, her being stuck in the cycle of rebirth, that is a fitting punishment for that character. Maybe she can escape it in her future cycles and incarnations. Maybe she can learn her lesson in that regard. But it won't be Claudia specifically. It'll be an individual forced to bear the weight of Claudia's actions. Which, granted, this is not to say that Alessa was in the wrong with her incarnation. Alessa was forced into that circumstance, but that is the unfortunate tragedies of life. And as we've seen even in this game, even beyond the grave, Alessa is attempting to escape the cycle. It's just Heather found a way to break it without nihilistic self-destruction. Because make no mistake, like we said, a new Cheryl leaving Silent Hill after a child is born from the corpse of God, that's just the ending of Silent Hill 1. It rhymes, but it is not a carbon copy. Heather is free for her own life. She didn't break the cycle, but she did escape it. She is allowed to live her own life. And the only reason that Cheryl leaves Silent Hill is in memory of her father. She chooses to be called Cheryl. Cheryl Mason II chooses the name. And that is a huge difference than anything Claudia was pushing. That's it. that is the message of hope and the conclusion of Silent Hill 3 and the Silent Hill series in general. And I have nothing else to say on that matter. It is a damn shame that this couldn't have been live, that this couldn't have been done the way 1 and 2 were done, but I'm proud of how it's turned out. And anyone who listened all the way, I thank you for putting up with it, sticking with me to the very end here. And where the doomed man goes from here, I have no idea, but we'll cross that bridge when we get there. See you, Space Cowboys.